Tonight we're going to be starting in Lesson 12. I think we've been in this book for getting close to 2 years now, so we're moving right along, getting through 11 chapters. But Lesson 12 deals with which law is binding. And we could just say what we've been discussing the last few weeks covers this, but of course I won't do that. Jesus set forth John set forth the principle of two basic laws in John 1:17 when he says the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So you have the law, you have grace and truth. And the two primary lawgivers, Moses and Christ. And if you go back to what our studies have been in Hebrews and talking about that in the last couple of weeks, Jesus is better. He's greater than Moses. He's greater than the high priest, the Levitical priest. His law is a better law based upon better promises. So Romans 6 and verse 14, we are not under the law, but under grace. And he's talking about the two systems here. The law, talking about the law of Moses, that old covenant. Grace, talking about that New Testament system, that which came through Christ, and that which he gave. In Galatians 3 and verse 11, Paul would say, no man is justified by the law before God. And again, the last couple of weeks in the book of Hebrews, we discussed that very thing. The law could justify no one. It could save no one. It had to come through Christ, and without Christ there is no salvation under any system. But now then we're going to talk specifically about the 10 Commandments. I guess that should have an S on the end. And our book does list the 10 Commandments, so you're going to need to look at that as well. But although agreeing that there are 10 commandments, there's no disagreement, there's 10 commandments. There are basically three different groupings or numbering systems of those 10 commandments. One is, and the one that we are primarily familiar with is called the Protestant 10 Commandments. It basically came through Josephus. And when I say Protestants, I should say with the exception of the Lutherans. The Lutherans do not follow this system that we see listed in our books. Another system, as opposed to that one, is the Jewish or Catholic ones. And then a third would be the Lutherans, and that one would be primarily from Augustine and his work. Now then, our listing, and then we'll go back, and we're not going to read these each time, but starting in Exodus 20, God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now, that's the first one according to the one that we are familiar with. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So thou shalt not make any graven image would be our second one that we, according to our listing, that we use. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Verse 7, we would find our third commandment. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Wouldn't it be nice if people obeyed that? Then verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So remembering the Sabbath, and all of those things that are mentioned in these verses are included in that remembering the Sabbath. Those Sabbatarians today don't really keep the Sabbath. They claim to, but they don't really keep the Sabbath. But that's the fourth commandment. The fifth, in verse 12, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Remember, Paul talked about the first commandment with promise. Well, he's talking about this: honor thy parents. Why? Honor thy father and mother, for this is the first commandment with promise. What's the promise? Your days may be long upon the earth. Then the sixth commandment, verse 13, thou shalt not kill. And let me add real quickly in regards to thou shalt not kill, it is literally thou shalt not murder. Killing is not necessarily murder. Not all killing is murder. Now, all murder is killing, but not all killing is murder. There are some killings that God commanded, including in relationship to the taking of the lands that he had promised Israel, and including capital punishment in relationship to those who violated certain laws that were those who were Israelites. And not to get on to capital punishment in our day, but God authorizes it. Too bad it's not really practiced in the way in which it should be. because then it could be a deterrent to crime. Then verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's the seventh one. And how people in our society need to learn that lesson. The eighth commandment, thou shalt not steal. Stealing is wrong. Would that include fudging on someone's time cards and time that they included in? Would it include maybe taking something from the job site as your own? There's a lot of things that are actually stealing that we don't classify as stealing because we practice them. What?
Income tax.
Oh, income tax.
Not sincerely working for your employer, 100% is stealing.
That would be as well. Not working as you should. Giving them an honest day's work for the money that they pay you. But yeah, the income tax. I mean, aren't we all supposed to fudge a little bit on our income taxes? Well, no, that's stealing. And I will say, though, I believe that we should take every legal deduction that the law allows. I don't think we should necessarily pay a penny more, but we shouldn't pay any less either. The ninth, in verse 16, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Well, that's basically lying against and defaming someone else. Would be wrong.
Gossip, wouldn't it?
That could include gossip. Sometimes we, in telling the truth, are gossiping. And so gossip would include more than just lying. But yes, it would include lying that's gossip. Then number 10, in verse 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. So we shorten that to thou shalt not covet. What does the word covet mean? The basic meaning is desire. The original words can be used in a good sense or a bad sense. Context determines which it is. But covetousness or coveting is a desired but is applied to an unlawful desire. Either the desire to have something that is not lawfully ours, or the desire to have something right, but obtaining it in an unlawful way. Either one of those aspects fall under the aspect of covet. Now then, since you've got a book and you can look at these, I'll give you the other arrangements, just in where they differ from what we would see in our book. The Catholic and Lutherans, which get theirs primarily from Augustine, they combine no other gods and graven images. So verses 2 through 6, they combine into one commandment. into the first commandment. Then they come down to the verse 17, thou shalt not covet. We have as one commandment. They split it into two commandments. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. And then the second one, or what they would say the 10th one, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. So you have 10 commandments just arranged differently. From number 1, I guess all the way through, or number 1 and number 10 would be the same, except 10 is split into 9 and 10 with them. Then there's the Jewish arrangement. For the Jews, they arranged it with verse 2 being the first commandment. Verse 2 is, of course, is, I am the Lord thy God. And he talks about then, I brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. But their first, or their listing, the first commandment would be, I am the Lord thy God. The second commandment then combines, thou shalt have no other gods, and you are not to make any graven images. So you combine what we would have as the second and or the first and second, and then they have the first as being that introductory or opening statement, I am the Lord thy God. That would be the difference. The rest of them would be numbered as we would recognize them. So, having said all that, I know you'll forget it by the time class is over, but there'll be a test on it. Now, if you run across someone that has a different numberings or a different arrangement, you will recognize, oh, they're using a different arrangement than what we're used to. Is it a big deal? No, not really. It's just the way in which they're arranged. All of the things that are covered in all of the arrangements. So, now then, though, let's talk about the law of Moses. There are many moral principles that are included in the law of Moses that are not part of the Decalogue. Now, what's the Decalogue? 10 Commandments. Deca means 10. Penta means 5. So if you come across something that's penta such and such, it's 5. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Start to say Matthew. And Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's the Pentateuch, 5 books. Decalogue is the 10 Commandments, because of the term deca, 10. Our book uses the illustration Exodus 21:16. I don't know why they chose that one, because there's so many that could be chosen, but he that stealeth, and the word stealeth there means actually the idea of kidnapping. He who kidnaps a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Is that killing someone? Yes, it is. Was it murder? Absolutely not. And going back to that in the 10 Commandments, the difference between murder and killing, Murder is the intentional taking of an innocent human being. And I just can't help myself, but who could be more innocent than a baby that's in the womb? But there's your difference. Killing is putting someone to death. Murder is taking an innocent human life. So as our book points out, we might say that the Ten Commandments served as a constitution for the people of Israel. Other rules and regulations are really based upon these Ten Commandments. But if you look at the two greatest commandments, as stated by Jesus, the supreme love for God, the first commandment, the second commandment, to love thy neighbor as thyself. Matthew 22, verse 37 through verse 39, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So love of God, love of neighbor as thyself. Jesus says those are the two greatest commandments. Will anyone identify those in the Decalogue or in the Ten Commandments? They're not there, are they? The two greatest commandments, according to Jesus, are not even in the Ten Commandments. The command to love God is actually found just after the second giving of the law. There is the giving of the law in Exodus 20th chapter. That is when the children of Israel had come out of Egyptian bondage. Because of sin, God refused to allow them to go into the promised land. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. At the end of that 40 years, they're gathered at the shores of the River Jordan. I got stuck in Red River for some reason. They're on the shores ready to go into the promised land, and there is a second giving of the law to that generation. That's found in Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter. Immediately after that, in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5, is where Jesus gets this principle, thou shalt love God first and foremost. Deuteronomy 6:5 says, And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. This statement is part of what is referred to as the Shema. S-H-E-M-A, Shema. Then that's the Shema properly, is starting in Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And just for future reference, that'll probably be around, 15 years from now when we're still in this book. But this is Yahweh, our God, Elohim, is one Yahweh. Elohim deals with basically the idea of power. Yahweh, used over 6,000 times. It's the difference between Yahweh, translated Lord, is you have the capital L and then in small caps O-R-D in our Bibles. If it's just capital L and then small letters O-R-D, it is the Hebrew word Adonai. But as I say, that's for future reference. But he's talking about Yahweh, our God is one Yahweh. So that's the Shema proper. Later on, though, it was expanded to include all of Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through verse 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the post of thy house and on thy gates. The Jews recited that Shema, those verses, every morning and again every evening. If we had verses that we wanted to remember, if you think we would have them memorized after a few years of reciting them every morning and every evening? Oh, I can't memorize the Bible. Yeah, we can if we put the effort into it. But that's the love of God. First and great commandment, not even a part of the 10 Commandments. Second greatest commandment, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, so love the neighbor. Is found in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18, where it says, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. I am Yahweh. So there's that statement, love thy neighbor as thyself. By the way, just as kind of an aside, this is also the passage which they derive the idea, well, we can hate others, hate our enemies. Why? Because it commands us to love our neighbors, so we must be able to hate our enemies. That was the reasoning behind it. Sounds like some of the reasoning of my brethren on things. But that, of course, was an abuse of the passage. But that command to love your neighbor as thyself, found in Leviticus 19 and 18. So the two greatest commandments that Jesus sets forth, neither one of them are found in the 10 Commandments. So the 10 Commandments served as a basis for the teaching of the law of Moses, but it wasn't the sum total of it. The 10 Commandments divide themselves into two main parts. The first four, this is in our categorizing them, deal with Israel's duty toward God. Then the last 6 deals with Israel's duty toward man, toward one another. Basically, if you look and examine Christ's example prayer to the disciples in Matthew the 6th chapter, you can divide it up into the same way. Our duty toward God and our duty toward man. But this is, it's pretty easy and pretty obvious when we're looking at the 10 Commandments. But the law could not save anyone. Could not do it. No one could be saved under this law of Moses. Why? Because no one could keep the law sinlessly. In Psalm 53, and verses 2 and 3, and this is also, I think, in the 14th Psalm. But God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if any that did understand, that did seek God. Every one of them is gone back. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. So David makes it pretty clear, no one lives a sinless life. We have all committed sin. In Romans 3, and actually if you look at verse 10, I'll just mention verse 10, but it goes back to this 53rd Psalm and basically quotes from it, that there is none that doeth good, no, not one. And then in verse 23, he mentions, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Is there anyone, not talking about Christ, is there anyone who has lived a sinless life? Think about Moses. He was a great lawgiver, right? Gave the law. Did he commit sin? Well, we know that he did, because he was not allowed to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. Why? Because he committed sin by striking the rock when God said to speak to it. He did something which God had not authorized. What about the high priest of the Old Testament? Surely they did. No, they didn't. On the Day of Atonement, they had to go into the most holy place with blood first for themselves to get atonement for their own sin. Then they left the most holy place, went and got the blood of a lamb and took it back into the most holy place for the sins of the people. But first, they had to cleanse themselves. And of course, the blood of bulls and goats could not take away sin. In Acts the 15th chapter, and in verse 10 in particular, of course, Acts 15 is this, what we refer to it as the Jerusalem Conference. Men had left the church that was at Jerusalem. They had gone out, and they were teaching that men must obey the law of Moses and must be circumcised in order to be saved. Christians had to do that. And so, Paul and Barnabas were sent to Jerusalem congregation to discuss the matter. They discussed it. And Peter in verse 10 makes the comment, "Now therefore why tempt ye God, to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear?" Why are you trying to subject people to the law of Moses, any part of the law of Moses, when we couldn't keep it? They won't be able to keep it either. No one can keep it. Thus it's a neck upon our, or a yoke upon our neck that we're not able to bear. Why? Because it only condemned, it could not save. And thus the law provided no real forgiveness. In Hebrews 9 and verse 22, it says that almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. They had to shed blood for there to be remission. The only problem was they were shedding the blood of bulls and goats. And in chapter 10 and verse 1, it says that the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. It could not cleanse them of their sin. Why? Because the blood of bulls and goats couldn't take away sin. And yet, almost all things are by the law purged with blood. Without shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness, yet the shedding of the blood of bulls and goats could not take away the sin. It was only a shadow, an image of the original, which would be Christ, who would come to die for our sins. And that's why the death of a sinless sacrifice was needed. That, of course, was God manifested in the flesh. He came to this earth. He lived a sinless life. No one. In fact, he challenged the Jews of his day. Which of you convicteth me of sin? They couldn't. He did nothing wrong. They put him to death anyway. He shed his blood. Why? So we could have forgiveness. Law of Moses couldn't offer it. Did not offer it. Amazing that people want to go back to that system that offers no forgiveness. Cannot offer forgiveness of sins because there's no provision for it. It revealed to us what sin is, but it could not take away the sin. For example, in that it revealed sin to us. If you look at Romans, the 7th chapter, and we'll just end with this probably, but Romans, the 7th chapter, and start in verse 1. Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law. What law is he talking about? He's talking about the law of Moses now. How that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. He uses an illustration, verse 2. For the woman which hath a husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Wherefore, my brethren, notice this in verse 4 in particular, Wherefore, my brethren, ye also are become dead to the law. What law is he talking about? He's talking about the law of Moses. You're dead to that law by the body of Christ, that ye should be married to another. Can't be married to Christ and hold on to any part of the law of Moses. That includes the Ten Commandments. Can't hold on to that and still be married to Christ. You're an adulteress if you do. Even him who is raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit unto God. Now, how do I know that he's talking about, and it includes the Ten Commandments? Because a lot of people refuse to admit that. Oh, yes, the law of Moses has been done away with, but we're still under the Ten Commandments. Look at verse 7. He's talking about, again, the law and how we have to die to the law so we can be married to Christ. He asks the question, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. Now what commandment? Where is that found?
Exodus 21 through 18, 7.
Well, it's the Ten Commandments. That's the law that he's talking about, the Ten Commandments in particular. And he said, I would not have known sin except the law stated, thou shalt not covet. And I'm dead to that law. I'm dead to the law of the Ten Commandments. I'm not subject to it. If I'm trying to be subject to those laws, then I'm an adulteress if I try to be married to Christ. You can't be married to Christ and still be subject to the law of Moses, any part of it. Now then, lest anyone say, well, that means you can go out and murder and kill and all, or murder and commit adultery and all of these other things. No, simply because God set forth within those moral principles that are found, yes, within the law of Moses. They're also found in the New Testament. And we cannot do those things because we're subject to the law of the New Testament. The state of Florida, what was one of the nations that Florida was at one time subject to? Spain. Okay, let's take Spain. Spain no doubt had a law that you could not kill people. That means we can kill people today because we're not subject to that law. Well, no. That's a fallacy of reasoning, because the law that we're subject to now states we can't kill people. I can't kill someone and be justified, not because Spain's law said it, and Spain's law was subject, or it was at that point, people were subject to it. I can't do it today because the laws of the state of Florida in the United States say you can't do that. Same law, yes, but I'm subject to it because it's part of the New Testament, going back to what we're talking about, I can't do it because it's part of the New Testament. Has nothing to do in reality with the Old Testament. I'm not subject to it, including those laws that would be the Ten Commandments. We'll pick up then there at that point, Lord willing, next time.